What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. NBA free agency has come and gone in the blink of an eye, with all of the major free agents basically signing at this point. Matt is going to be joining me here in just a minute to break down our favorite moves from free agency and our least favorite. We're going to go through all the winners and losers of NBA free agency. But first, we had a relatively shocking trade request, not super shocking if you listen to this show, with Dame Lillard asking out of Portland, one of Matt's favorite players, Mr. Loyalty, Mr. Everybody else runs from the grind except for me, has heel turned in one of the biggest 180s we've seen from an NBA superstar in some time, going from criticizing guys like Kevin Durant and Paul George who went to build super teams to now pushing the Portland Trailblazers to allow him to build a super team of his own down in Miami. So we're going to get Matt's reaction on that, talk through the implications of Dame Lillard's trade request, what it means, and where he's actually going to go. Because although he asked for Miami, it seems that may not be the best option for everybody involved. So we'll talk through that, and then we're going to get to winners and losers in free agency. Let's go. All right, Matt is here. And before we get started, I want to apologize if anybody hears bottle rockets going on outside my house. Today is, in fact, the 4th of July. My neighbors thought it'd be a good idea to start the festivities early, even though the sun hasn't gone down. Sure, there's some beverages involved down the street, and it's kind of going on right near my window. So I don't think you guys can hear it because of the noise suppression I have in the studio here, but just in case it pops up. But Matt, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm gonna say better than Joe Cronin.
Better than Joe Cronin, but probably not as good as my neighbors are doing right now.
Honestly, boy, that's gonna be hard to match.
Uh, yeah, at least until Friday when I see you in person, and then we'll
Yes,
we'll see, because
we'll
I think
surpass it.
we can match, we can at least match the level of beverages that have been consumed by my neighbors when I see you guys on Friday. Much better than Joe Cronin. I hope that everybody who's listening to this podcast is doing better than Joe Cronin right now. Free agency happened over the weekend. It came and went. I always find it amazing that the agents are so diligent and work so hard that they can get entire contracts negotiated within the first minute of free agency. Because free agency started at 6 p.m. on Friday. Contracts started rolling in at 6:01. And I was like, I applaud. I applaud the sports agents who are just so quick that they can get contracts done in 1 minute with no tampering and no prior communication with the team, because that's not allowed by the NBA.
Peak efficiency.
I I mean, we're going to get to winners and losers of free agency later in the podcast, but first winner is just the agents. Just round of applause for the agents getting contracts done that quick. That's like, what is the PER of that agent? 100?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the highest number it allows for.
They probably broke the scale with how efficient they're churning those contracts out. But uh, free agency kind of, I wouldn't say super exciting. I think maybe a little bit more exciting than it had any right to be, considering the list of guys who were free agents.
Yeah.
But the big news, Mr. Loyalty, Mr. Respect, Mr. I don't run from the grind. Dame Lillard has finally asked the Portland Trailblazers for a trade, specifically to the Miami Heat. Matt, our long national nightmare is over. We've been talking for weeks at this point
Oh,
about.
we've been talking for years about how this needed to come. For a couple years at least.
I was doing my notes for this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I really had to think about where to start on this, because it's just there's so much
It's a
there.
tangled web.
My first take on this is controversial, but Part of me thinks that Dame is actually doing Portland a favor.
We've been talking about for a while.
What we talked about this specifically last week is that Portland was a team caught between two timelines.
Mm-hmm.
They want to compete with Dame, but they also want to build for the future with Scoot and Sharp. And Dame is finally forcing their hand and making them pick a direction, something that they have refused to do for years at this point.
I mean, to a certain degree too, like, they're so assuming they don't move these guys, they're still gonna have Sharp, they're still gonna have Simons. These guys that, you know, spent time with Dame, seeing the way that he worked and like improving his game. And that can be part of that culture that stays there when he's gone, because they're definitely going to need it. But my concern with this franchise is that, at least the way they are reporting, the way they want to pursue this season, even after trading him, is that they're still going to win now. I think it shows a lack of understanding of how much Damian Lillard has elevated that team. And even though he missed significant games last year, like I think it was like 20 or 30 games, he was still playing at like elite point guard levels last year.
Part of the reason that he missed so many games, though, is because he agreed to be shut down near the end of the season.
Yeah, but he missed at least like 15 games early in the year with like a hammy or something like
Yeah, I
that.
mean, he's had legitimate injury concerns for a couple of years now because he had the core thing a couple
Yeah.
of years ago and that lingered into a second season. He had hammy,
Yep.
knee, some other stuff last year. But you're right, when he plays, he's still an elite level player.
Yeah. That kind of draws into question right now. Like, we're both like the same age as him. you know, the offensive load that is required of a guy like him to be the only star on the team, like, can he still do that and stay healthy at this age? I'm not going to say he can't, but it's probably going to be able to stay on the court a lot more if he doesn't have to do that much on offense. If he can share it with other guys.
Yeah, Dame was literally born 5 days after me. So
Yeah.
my birthday's in a week. His birthday is in a week and 5 days.
Yeah.
A couple of things. I mean, one, I think the take of the GM and the owner to be like, yeah, we want to compete still next year, even after trading him away.
Yeah.
I think that's just like a very natural take from like competitive people. It reminds me of when LeBron left the Cavs and Dan Gilbert came out and he's like, I promise the city of Cleveland, we're going to win a championship before LeBron James does. And he's never welcome back and blah, blah. And there's a lot of feelings that get hurt. There's a lot of anger
Yep.
in there. And, nobody wants to come on July 4th and tell their fans like, oh, hey, we're just going to suck next year,
Right.
even without Dame. So I understand the take of it. Depending on what they get back for him, I like the core and I like where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
You start with Scoot, who we both liked better than Miller.
Yeah.
I think, at least personality wise. You have Scoot, who has the potential to be a star, Simons, who's already a very good young player, and Sharp, who showed flashes last year of
Yeah.
development. They give Grant a bag in free agency in an apparent attempt to keep Dame, but like I'd still like Jeremy Grant. I don't mind
I
Jeremy Grant for all
I
that
I
money.
like him a lot. I don't know that he fits their timeline.
He does not.
On that same note, like, they've got another piece that you and I both really like in Yusuf Nurkic. Again, the timeline. I think he's more valuable to them as a trade piece because he's far better than his salary currently indicates. So like there's more value to him in that way.
I think the problem with Yusuf Nurkic is that we're the only two people who like him. At this point, I've heard a lot of disparaging of Nurk over the last couple days, and the fact that
Yeah.
he could potentially be traded with Dame somewhere. Um, so depending on what they get back, I kind of like the pieces. I like where it's
Yeah.
going for them. But like, let's get to the meat of the situation here. Is that I said he kind of did them a favor by demanding a trade. The way in which he did not do them a favor, and
Yeah.
the thing that has pissed off a lot of people, is that he's demanding to go to the Miami Heat. And all reports are that it's Miami Heat or bust for Dame, that he won't play anywhere else. He doesn't want to play anywhere else. He will not accept a trade to another team, even though he doesn't have a no trade clause. And Miami, just quite frankly, does not have the pieces to make this a worthwhile endeavor for the Portland Trailblazers.
And part of this is like honestly less about Dame and more about the state of the NBA and the media and like the insiders and everything has made it so that nothing can ever remain behind closed doors. It's been so public for so long that it made it so that this was the way this was going to be from the start. If you can at least keep it quiet, I mean, like Stafford, by the sounds of things, the way he and McVay ran into each other and like really hit it off, he was always going to end up with the Rams. Right.
Yes, him and McVay just happened to run into each other at a resort.
Well, with like 40 other NFL players and like 30 other staff. Like it was a very common place for NFL vacations, apparently.
I like to think
But
of it as like a meet cute where
yeah, that's
they
exactly what it is.
bump into each other at a bar and McVay accidentally spills his drink and looks up and goes, "Oh, I'm so oh, Matt Stafford, potential Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Oh
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't even
no,
see you there."
McVay was absolutely gunning for that.
Yeah, it's more like it's not really a mute cute as much as it is like McVay sitting at one end of the bar and he's like, "Hey, see that hot blonde, that 9 at the end of the bar? Send him a drink from me."
Yeah, but that was at least kept under wraps so that there wasn't this like incredibly huge vacuum of power in terms of like bargaining power for the Lions. And in part, I think it's like really just the state of the NBA and the way these insiders are literally in these guys' like pockets all the time. They're still like, I think Dame could have been more quiet about this. I think he could have been more. He should have just honestly made the decision like right after the season was over.
I think this is 100% on purpose by Dame to make this public. Chris Haynes, who's been Dame's mouthpiece to the media for years now, was the first one to have the story. And part of making it public is to create that vacuum of power that you talked about, to force the team's hand to send you to where you want to go. Right? Like you want to make it known publicly, if you're the player, that you will not go anywhere else. You will not be happy anywhere else because you want to discourage other teams from getting involved in trading for you.
Yeah.
I think especially knowing like Dame's not stupid. He's looking at Miami and being like, okay, I want to play with Butler and Bam. So how do I get to Miami to play with them without one of them being involved in the trade back? Right. Because like these guys want to go to these teams to compete for a championship. So if the trade involves Bam Adebayo, which is technically the only way this could really be fair, looking at what Miami has to offer, Dame's not going to be happy with that. So it's like, hey, not only do you need to trade me to this place, but you also can't get any of their good players back because I need those guys where I'm going.
I don't disagree. That's what's happening. I just am also acknowledging that that's not unique. Like
No,
that's just
no,
the
it's
NBA now.
the funny thing about Dame is that he's gone from, and I kind of jokingly said it earlier, but he's gone from like the loyalty guy. Like this is what he's been known for years is his loyalty to Portland,
Mm-hmm.
the criticizing of guys like Kevin Durant and Paul George, like publicly criticizing them and being like, you guys all run from the grind. I embrace it. I'm trying to build a winner in Portland. I don't want to leave for years and years. He's now like flipped all of that and used every single play from the Kevin Durant, Paul George, Kyrie Irving. I mean, maybe not Kyrie, but like all the guys who have demanded trades. He's pulling all the pages out of their playbook now to like, I know I have 3 years left of my deal, 4 years left of my deal, but you have to trade me and you have to trade me here. And it's up to
Yeah.
you to figure out how I'm going to get there. Even though trading him to Miami for the package that's been proposed is basically getting like 50 cents back on the dollar for Dame.
Yeah.
And anytime you trade the superstar in the trade, you're going to lose the trade for everybody except the Nets, maybe. But you're probably going to lose this trade if you're trading Dame. Like you're not going to get appropriate value for him at this point.
No.
But
They
he's
would have had to do
particularly
this
rough.
2 years ago if they wanted to get appropriate value.
They could still get good value for him if he wasn't forcing his way to a specific team.
Even if he wasn't doing that, I don't think they're getting the traditional superstar value anymore.
No. I mean, traditional. It went from being like one level to being like this astronomical, insane amount of picks and players. Back, I think it's coming back down now. It's like a housing bubble. It's like where people are making ridiculous offers on houses, and then we start
Right.
getting back to normal as interest rates improve. But
I think if they were going to do this, they needed to do this before it started to be like pretty much known that this was going to eventually come.
yeah,
And we started talking about this 2 years ago. So that was when this needed to be done. And that's where, like, I'm not going to say that, like, Dame doesn't have to answer questions about having kind of changed his tune on these methods, because he does. Like, you don't get to, make comments about super teams and then go and literally intentionally make a super team. However, I don't want to let the Trailblazers off the hook here, because we've been talking about them trying to walk two paths for the last 2 years. And I kind of don't blame this response. He continued to be clear, like, yes, I want to win here. But then you continue to go down both roads and you didn't pick one. And yeah, I do think that he should have made his decision about whether or not he wanted to stay or not by the end of his season. But like, he watched what they did with the draft and having the third overall pick. And they're like, okay, well, they're still building for the future. They're still planning to rebuild. So yeah, like, it was either sit through another season where you win like 35 games and don't make the playoffs, or force your way out. And it's like, they were kind of just asking for this to happen.
I'm not going to criticize Dame for asking for a trade.
Yeah,
right.
I think
like,
we're kind of on the same page there. It's more about how he did it.
I'll get to what I'm going to criticize him for in a sec, but
Yeah.
like, he's 32. He's going to be 33 in a week, which,
Yep.
Hey, it's not that old in real life. Turning 33 in a week is not that old in real life, right? But in sports, it's old. And like in basketball, he's at the end of his peak. If he is going to be the best player on a championship team, it's going to have to happen in the next, let's be super generous and say 4 years, right?
Mhm.
Like by the time he's 36, 37, because he's a small point guard. Those guys, we'll see. Someone with his shooting stroke might age a little better than like a Chris Paul has, like maybe a little bit more gracefully, but it's going to have to happen soon. And you're on a team that's clearly rebuilding. He was very clear with them. He wants to compete. They had pick number 7 last year. They had picks 3 and 23 this year, and they used them on rookies. Admittedly, used them very well. They've done a very good job drafting, but I totally understand. I agree with you from Dame's perspective. You're obviously not going to win a championship on this team. The front office is obviously not committed to competing around you, no matter what they say.
Yep.
Because they would have traded those picks, whether it's last year or this year. And we went through last week and said, one of the really hard things for Portland, just to give them some credit, is that I don't know that the guy to help them compete was out there this year.
Yeah.
Luka hasn't asked out of like Dallas, or there wasn't the one dude for them to trade for that was really going to turn this around. So I think they're in a really hard spot. And that's kind of where I go back to Dame did them a favor by being the one to ask out, because the only alternative to keep him happy was going to be to overspend by trading away young assets and getting someone who's not worth the assets you're trading away, basically. The part where I will criticize Dame, and it's not even really criticizing him as much as just being critical of him, is that, like I said, it's years and years of you guys run from the grind. I'm loyal. I want to build a contender. The super teams are for losers, and I will never build a super team. And even after he requested the trade, he's like, I don't want to go somewhere to build a super team. I just want to go somewhere that has a couple good players that give me a chance to compete. Motherfucker, Miami is one of the best franchises in the sport. They just won the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals the season before. We just talked on a recent podcast about how Miami's actually one of the most successful franchises in basketball, considering they've made multiple NBA finals, they've won the Eastern Conference, they've done this, and this. Dame Lillard, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo is straight nasty.
Yes.
Absolutely disgusting. This podcast just taking away all the demand for a trade stuff. That's our dream team with these guys.
That is that is the epitome of beautiful basketball.
But it's a super team.
Yeah.
Especially in the playoffs where we're ranking our NBA top 30 right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell everybody that's listening to this right now, when we get to the top 10, Jimmy Butler is going to be shockingly high for a lot of you. Because of how good he is in the playoffs and how great he's been for years now.
Once I got past 3, that's when the discussion started.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So to demand a trade to Miami and be like, okay, but Jimmy and Bam can't be involved in the trade because Bam's my friend and I want to play with him and we need Jimmy to win a championship. Portland's in a really, really bad spot here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say the same thing here that I said on Reddit that got me in a lot of trouble. It is not Dame's responsibility to worry about what Portland is getting back. Dame has requested a trade. He's told you where he wants to go. That's fantastic. It is up to Portland to maximize what they get back for him. Just because he asked you for something doesn't mean you have to do it. I think that is one of the biggest traps that teams fall into right now in the NBA.
It's come up in our discussions off air multiple times. He doesn't have a no trade clause. Ironically, that is something that the guys that he's been critical of absolutely negotiate into their contracts. Damian Lillard did not. So I think that is at least worthy of note.
Yeah, but they came and they're like, hey, Dame, here's a contract that will pay you $66 million when you're 36.
Yeah.
I don't think you're worried about the trade clause at that point. You're just like,
I
yeah,
don't think he really needed to worry about whether or not he was going to get that money, because if they didn't give it to him, someone else would.
this is the thing about where the NBA is going that I find so fascinating, though, is that with the power the players have to demand trades and to, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to this point, we're going to see with Portland. I think that this is really an interesting case because is Portland going to stand up to Dame? Like, does Cronin actually have the balls to trade him somewhere else or to go out and get like a better package from someone and pull the trigger on that and not do this, not trade him to where he wants to go? Or do they do it and they accept like 50 cents on the dollar and do Dame the favor with the hope that the goodwill helps them in the future, even though that's complete and total BS? Like that, just to address that real quick, like teams trade superstars to their preferred destination because they want to have the goodwill from like the superstar's agent in the future, where they're like, oh yeah, the agent will totally repay the favor someday. Wink, wink. I can say this as a Sacramento fan. The agent will never, ever repay you the favor, Portland. No superstar is ever going to want to go to Portland as a free agent. It doesn't matter what you do
So
here.
here's my counterpoint to that, though. You don't want to be the GM that creates a grudge with one of these high-end agents, though. And that's the danger there with this, is that obviously, like, Dame is a high-level guy. Like his agent's gonna have a lot of other guys in the NBA. It's some guys that you're gonna want. Like, you don't want to necessarily have that like barrier in your way going forward
But
too.
like nobody's gonna sign in Portland anyway. Nobody ever signs in Portland. It's a small market. Like I don't.
You're talking about like the big max deal guys, and like, yeah, that's true, sure, but like 9 times out of 10, like, that's not gonna work in building your franchise anyways. It's getting like the guys that are a step below that and filling out your roster with guys that can actually help you win games, rather than like landing that one star that usually ends up making a bigger difference than signing like one guy that's on a max deal when he hits free agency. Because I honestly actually can't remember the last time that happened and that team went and like won the championship, other than, yeah, since like KD going to the Warriors.
Yeah, but like I would just push back on this whole concept. And I don't disagree with you that like, yeah, it's gonna hurt them from signing mid-tier free agents in the future too. But
Yeah.
like what's more important? Being able to sign like a Gary Trent in 3 years or not taking Tyler Hero and Kyle Lowry back as your return for Dame? Like
Well, I'm
this
and
is
I'm not suggesting that you take like a significantly worse package, but it's like, okay, if the difference is like what like a return of like 5%, like, I would rather not have the negative consequences further down the road.
yes. There I
And
we
and
will agree
that's
there.
and that's that's where my concern is that the packages that are going to be thrown out there for them aren't going to be as exorbitant as they're hoping for, and the difference is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I'm just saying, like, if Utah comes and they're like, hey, we think we can make this work with Dame because he is under contract for 3 more seasons or 4 more seasons. I'm like, what is Dame gonna do if he doesn't get traded to Miami? Sit out and not get paid $66 million?
No, he won't
He
actually do that.
he's playing. He's playing.
Outside of the actual culture of Utah, which I'm not going to get into, because the culture of that franchise, I think he could actually fit pretty well with.
Yeah, well, I'm using Utah as an example because they have
Yeah,
assets. Like, let's say
right.
the Thunder come and they're like, "Hey, we'll give you Josh Giddey and Chet Holmgren and some picks." Like, Cronin's not going to be like, I don't know. I really want the goodwill from Dame's agent, and I want to do right by
No.
Dame. Like, I'm going to send him to
Yeah.
Miami for Hero and Lowry and Duncan Robinson
Yeah.
instead. Like, you have to do the right thing here for your
Yeah.
franchise long term.
I
And
just
I
don't see any of that happening.
no, God, no. I don't think so either. But that again goes back to the strategy by Dame to get to his preferred destination,
Right.
which my being critical of Dame is just that like we beat up like I think there are tiers to the trade request guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like Dame is not a tier 1. Tier 1 to me is like KD, Harden, Kyrie, like
Yeah.
guys who have requested multiple trades and they're not happy anywhere and whatever.
I didn't really like how Katie requested that trade from Brooklyn and then threatened to sit out and all that. And I didn't even mind him like leaving the Thunder in free agency. It was just that you literally went to the team that just came back from down 1-3 and beat you. Like that. So I don't even know if he's like top tier for me. I would definitely say like AD and PG are my top two.
I think Harden is the worst.
Kawhi,
Harden is by far the worst because
yeah,
he's
he's up
demanded
there too.
well, he's demanded 3 trades now and he's
Yeah,
demanding another one.
yeah, he's done it so much that you kind of just forget that it happens.
I know. I just think like people are not going to this is kind of flip since we were talking about this a little bit the other day, but like I think at first people were just like, yeah, good for Dame. Like he should get out of there, blah blah. And I think that like there needs to be a little bit more accountability here of like this dude doing a complete 180 personality wise and going from Mr. Loyalty, Mr. I'm going to build a contender here no matter what to pulling out every single play from the playbook and being like, you're going to trade me to my preferred destination or I'm going to sit out and I'm going to cry. And you're going to take whatever return they give you because that's where I want to go. And it's my turn to, but like to do all this. And not that I actually believe he would sit out, but like he's threatened it at this point.
Yeah,
We held Dame in a higher regard than so many other players.
yeah,
And I think that it's time to stop that. I think like you can you guys can you can love Dame. He's a great player.
yeah,
I love watching him. I just think like the holier than thou stuff, we need to be appropriately critical of what he's doing here. And
yeah.
he doesn't have to be on the level of those other guys, but like this is not like Curry, Giannis, guys who are staying with their franchises long term and not complaining. And like,
Well, yeah, because
we'll see how that
Curry's
goes.
decision making has been so difficult on that. Like,
truly the toughest road. I get it because there's
yeah,
the subset of guys that everybody points to and says like, look at like Curry and Giannis and Jokic. They would never do this. Like, yeah, but those guys' teams also built contenders around them.
yep.
And while Portland tried for what 10 years,
He's been there 11 years.
yeah, but they tried to build a contender around him for
Yeah,
9, let's call it. I actually like. I think that they did right by him for a long time. I really do think they tried, and they made the Western Conference Finals that one year. Like,
yep.
I looked at all the guys they brought in, and I'm like, it's not the best list ever, but like,
Where it fell apart was when they understandably realized, like, hey, it's just not going to work with CJ McCollum, which we agree. But they never adjusted the makeup of the roster to accommodate that. And in some ways, like the emergence of Anthony Simons almost hurt them because like you can't not play him. He's that good. But you also can't play him next to Dame because now you're just doing the same thing. After that trade, they were really never able to build a roster that had a chance of competing.
The funny thing is that even with trading Dame now, they're just going to keep doing the same thing because
Yeah.
Scoot and Simons next to each other are going to have all of the same defensive issues that Dame and McCollum had next to each other. It's like it's two
Yeah.
short scoring guards. Not that Scoot can't potentially do a lot more than that, but like he's 6'2",
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't exactly project as like a big time defender. And it's like you just have this makeup of this roster that you guys apparently love in Portland, and you're just going to keep doing it forever. So, I mean, all in all,
Yeah.
I think that this is going to stretch on for a while because the reports lately have been that Portland is not impressed with Miami's package, and sounds so bad.
Okay.
So Portland's not impressed with what Miami has to offer. They're trying to get other teams involved to increase the return. I've heard some interesting permutations, but like there was a trade proposal where the Nets would like take Tyler Hero and throw in some picks and maybe like a young wing to go back to Portland. But then the report came out the Nets are like, no, if we're going to take Hero, we want to be compensated for that. And also we want Ben Simmons to be included in the trade. And so like I still go back to what we've been talking about for weeks now is that the appropriate return for a player of Dame Lillard's talent is just not out there. Like the
Yeah.
contending teams don't need a point guard except for the Heat, and non-contending teams don't need a 33-year-old point guard who's making $60 million a year. So like the teams with the most to offer, the Jazz, the Thunder, the Rockets to a degree, like young talent, picks, those teams are not getting involved in a three-way trade. It doesn't seem like none of them want Tyler Hero either. So I think Portland's gonna have to get creative here on how they do this, but
Yeah.
the return for Dame is gonna be low.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the nature of the beast right now, and also like the market is pretty barren for this trade. So, I mean, good luck to Cronin. That's why we started the show by saying that we're hoping you guys are all doing a lot better than he is right now, because it's just he's in a tough spot, man. And
In decent part due to his own doing. He's not solely responsible for this, but he has certainly contributed to it. That's kind of what happens when the writing's on the wall and you just keep kicking the can down the road.
I ultimately think this is what they wanted. Maybe not for Dame to come in and say, you have to trade me to this one place that doesn't have the assets to give you back. I think that they wanted to trade Dame. And we talked about how you couldn't be the guy in Portland who traded Dame until he requested it. Right. So like, yeah, they're in a bad spot right now, but I think looking at their young talent that they're like, hey, I think they're all like behind closed doors. I think they were all saying to each other like, oh man, if we could just get a good return for Dame, we're looking at a really good young core and it's like time to move forward.
I mean, that's why you have that discussion with him 2 years ago, say like, hey, we want to rebuild. Are you in on a rebuild or not? Because we're rebuilding. And obviously he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. That's why he's requested this trade. 33-year-old stars don't want to go through a rebuild because their career could be over in 2 or 3 years anyways. So it's understandable. I just think that it was handled poorly on both sides, really. But
yeah, everybody has some culpability here, and I think that this stretches on for a while. So we'll keep monitoring it. I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout the NBA offseason. Well, it'll finally happen when we're doing an NFL pod, and we'll be like, we have to do a Dame pod. It's coming back. So
we'll be like in the middle of our divisional reviews.
Yes. So that was the big news from the weekend. But besides that, there were a lot of transactions. Like we said, free agency came and went. So we wanted to go over who we thought the winners and losers of free agency are. Matt, I'm going to warn you, there are parts of this assignment I did not take super seriously. So they're not all like teams and players, but we'll go back and forth. We'll both do a winner and then we'll do a loser, and we'll go back and forth that way until we've exhausted our list. You want to give me your first winner?
My first winner is Kyrie Irving because someone still thinks he's worth that kind of fucking money. It's also my first loser because giving Kyrie that deal is absolutely ludicrous, and they are screwed. Like they're done. They're not
What
competing this year.
what was it? It was 126 for 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Dallas as a loser too because I think you're playing with fire. Like we just talked about all the reasons that players ask out. And I think we're pushing toward Luka potentially asking for a trade from the Mavericks if he has to put up with Kyrie's antics. My first winner was second round picks. I think second round picks are typically thought of as like pretty useless. And, if you draft a guy who ends up being a role player in the NBA in the second round, like that's pretty good. And you're happy with that. I mean, some people have struck oil absolutely with like getting Jokic in the second round, but that's a 1 in a million, right? So like second rounders are typically just like throw-ins. But like you look at the list of players who were traded for second round picks in the past week: Obi Toppin, Chris Duarte, Monty Morris, KJ Martin, and John Collins. Rudy Gay was in there as well, but it was Rudy Gay and like second round pick for John Collins. Second rounders were also used in Joe Harris going from the Nets to the Pistons, Max Strus going from the Heat to the Cavs, and some other like salary dump moves. So Renaissance for the second round picks, like new value. I think like all those players that I just mentioned, like pretty good guys. Getting them for a couple seconds is like,
yeah,
solid for the second round picks. My first loser is Clutch Sports CEO Rich Paul. Don't get me wrong, Clutch had a great weekend, but every single tweet from Woj and from Shams talking about a player from Clutch signing said Clutch Sports CEO Rich Paul and agent whoever tell ESPN that blah blah blah. Just like a real loser move from Rich Paul to like clearly asked all the reporters to list him as Clutch Sports CEO and include him on every tweet. Micromanaging his employees, loser move. I kind of got it for like big deals like Draymond, where it's like, ESPN reporting that Clutch Sports CEO Rich Paul and agent so-and-so have agreed to a deal with the Warriors for 4 years, 120 million or whatever ended up being. I got that. Then I saw that Corey Joseph signed with the Warriors the other day and that they specifically mentioned Rich Paul in the Corey Joseph tweet. And I was like, okay, this guy is like serious, like insecurity showing here. So big loser energy from Rich Paul this weekend.
It's a bad look. It just feels like a guy who also has Portland unimpressed with his package.
Oh, who's your next winner and loser? New loser for the list, Rich Paul's package.
My next winner is much to my chagrin, the Los Angeles Lakers.
This was my next winner.
Yeah.
I hate this when we do list and we don't coordinate it because we always have the same stuff.
So they got Gabe Vincent for a lot cheaper than I thought he was going to get. I think it was like what, 11 million a year.
Yeah, 3 years, 33 million.
And then they got Jackson Hayes too. Can
I just say, like, I also listed like Jackson Hayes as a good move for them.
Yeah.
Learned a lot about Jackson Hayes this weekend.
Yeah.
Despicable person. Like real
perfect for LA.
Yeah, real piece of shit. I was
perfect
like
for LeBron.
Yeah. I was like, man, I was excited. Like I saw Jackson Hayes was a free agent, and I was like, man, he's a young guy who has shown some flashes as a good rim protector. Like maybe that's someone the Kings could target. I am really glad that we did not get him.
Yeah.
I mean, I know how you and Clint feel about LeBron. This is like next level, like domestic abuse, uh, beat up his girlfriend's puppy kind of things. Like
Yeah.
literally, like injured his girlfriend's puppy. Yeah, don't like him.
Yeah. Well, glad you guys didn't end up signing him because that would be hard to reckon with.
Would not be wearing a Sacramento Kings Jackson Hayes jersey. That's for sure. I mean, so you mentioned Jackson Hayes, Gabe Vincent. They get Torian Prince and Cam Reddish basically for free.
Yeah.
I thought the dumbest thing and the most important thing for them is that multiple reports for the last couple of weeks were mentioning that they would match any Austin Reeves deal up to $100 million. And
Yeah.
they didn't have to do that to bring him back. They brought him back on a 4-year, $56 million deal. You know,
Yeah.
nobody, like, why would nobody go out and offer Austin Reeves like a massive offer sheet just to make the Lakers match it? Like, why are you doing the Lakers favors in free agency? It's stupid to me.
Yeah. I mean, like, at least offer like the max that you could potentially swallow so that they can't go lower.
Well, it's like if you had it on good intel that they were going to match $98 million, like
Right.
go and like give Austin Reeves something, man. Just like make the Lakers sweat a little bit. Just
Yeah.
they just let him have him for half of what they were willing to give him.
Yeah.
They also brought back Rui Hachimura and D'Angelo Russell, which like
Yep.
varying degrees of how you feel about all these players, but like for a team that seemed like they were basically going to be able to bring back Reeves and maybe Hachimura to
Mm-hmm.
just go out and just redo the entire roster with decent to good players for very reasonable to cheap amounts of money.
Yeah.
I had them as a winner too, much to my
Yeah.
chagrin.
Yeah. And I mean, like Reeves and Hachimura were really important parts of that team turning it around at the end. Those role players were really, really important for them. My next loser is the Boston Celtics. I I can live with them moving on from Marcus Smart to try to add something to that roster and make them a better team. Kristaps Porzingis is not it. I just don't see that working out for them. I know that they needed someone that could play other than Al Horford, but I very much think that come playoff time, they are going to see that that is just not going to positively impact their ability to win difficult games.
My next winner is extension eligible stars.
Yep.
Tyrese Halliburton, LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis, Chris Middleton, Desmond Bane, all signed max or near max extensions with their teams. The one near max, Domantas Sabonis, actually took less than what he was eligible for to help the Kings maintain roster flexibility, which, like, we talked about this ad nauseum, but ironic that the deal that was supposed to help us maintain flexibility is the deal that put us over the cap and made it so we can't make any more moves this offseason. So, yeah, all these guys signed massive deals, well deserved for the most part. The LaMelo Ball one kind of scares me a little bit, but,
Yeah.
winners there. My next loser is all strippers in the greater Philadelphia area. James Harden, I think, shocked the world when he opted into his $38 million player option, only to demand a trade from the Philadelphia 76ers. James Harden is very well known for the amount of time and money that he spends in the strip club. So sorry for the hardworking ladies there. But what is one person's loss is another's gain. There will be strip clubs in a different city that will be blessed to have James Harden. In all seriousness, no, though, I had the 76ers as a loser. The Harden opting in not only stopped them from doing anything else, but now they're going to have to trade him in what is sure to be a like they're not getting a lot back for him at this point, especially because he's not extension eligible. So whoever signs him is literally getting him for 1 year and then is going to have to negotiate with him in the offseason. And I just look at this and I'm like, man, so now if you trade him, you're coming back next season with like Maxey and Harris and Embiid and PJ Tucker. This team is going nowhere right now unless they get some insane deal for Harden that I'm not thinking about. And I think it's only a matter of time if they keep failing and failing and failing until Embiid demands a trade as well.
Crazy idea we're going to throw out there. The 76ers are the third team. So Portland says they want a star back in return.
Oh, Lord.
He's the star. He's the star.
Oh, that we'll come back and do a winners and losers pod if that happens. And everyone involved in that will be a loser except for Miami.
That's just highway robbery at that point. I think Domantas Sabonis signing for less than the max is a huge win for the Kings. Like, obviously, this year it kind of doesn't necessarily change all that much, but long-term, big picture, and with, the concerns that Halliburton trade might have been short-sighted, this adds a lot more longevity to the Kings' potential window. So I was really happy for you guys that you were able to get that done. I also it's kind of a common theme on my my winners. I liked for the Cavs picking up Max Strus in that sign and trade. He, before the remaining teams proved that they all had dead legs and nobody could shoot worth a damn anymore, he was really, really important for Miami. Really on their last couple runs, going deep and just being the guy who could get really important buckets for them on the outside as a spot up shooter.
Yeah, I was actually going to have Miami on here as a loser because
losing those guys hurts.
Losing Gabe Vincent and Max Strus really hurts. But obviously with the Dame trade request, I think it's very clear that Miami knew that was coming maybe a little bit sooner than the rest of us did, including the Portland Trailblazers. We didn't talk about it a ton in the Dame segment, but I think there's a little coordination going on there between Dame and the Heat based on the Heat's free agency moves. So I can't include them as a loser if they're going to get Dame, but if they don't, we will revisit this list because this could be a pretty brutal offseason for the Heat.
Yes, I would agree with that. The Nuggets losing Bruce Brown is going to hurt. He was vital for them.
I 100% agree with that. I also just want to say that Bruce Brown caught a bag.
Yes, he did. And he earned every bit of it, dude.
You heard it here first, man. We talked about this. I got in so many fights with Denver fans after I said on the podcast that there was no way in hell he was accepting the $7.8 million that they had to offer. I got like a lot of negative feedback about that. People were like, he's coming back. During the parade, he said 1 more year. And I was like, he was inebriated and celebrating. This dude is catching a bag somewhere. I did not expect it to be that big. My last winner, I fought myself on this a little bit. I am going to say the Sacramento Kings. In my biased opinion, to be clear, I don't like that we traded away a first round pick just to clear the space to basically keep the same guys. Like
Yeah.
I talked about this on the podcast last week. I thought Monty had inside intel that he was going to get somebody, and that's why he made the space. And then they used the space on Harrison Barnes extension, bringing back like Len and Lyles. Not any moves that I hate. I just feel like we didn't address our biggest weakness, which was wing defense is desperately needed and rim protection. But also, I don't know that the move was really out there in free agency to do that. Like none of the big money wings are going to really address your wing defense. There wasn't really a great rim protector except for Brook Lopez. And like, do you really want to be paying Brook Lopez 20 to $30 million a season right now? So I don't know. I still would have liked to have had the pick. The reason I do have them in the win column is pretty much exactly what you said. They lock down the core long term now. We know we're going to have Fox, Sabonis, Keegan,
Yep.
Malik Monk. Like all these guys are now locked in for multiple seasons. One of the biggest advantages you can have in the NBA is consistency and just like having the same guys in the locker room, like having your core
Yeah.
together for multiple years and like growing together. So I like that. And then just my biggest fear on the Halliburton trade was that we would trade Halliburton for Sabonis and he would be awesome and then leave and sign a max extension somewhere else. So the fact that like we traded for a guy and then convinced him to sign a long-term extension that's not even the max, like we didn't have to overpay him to stay. He's just going to stay. That
Yeah.
is like something I absolutely could not have imagined for the last 20 seasons. And then to top it off, they drop bomb ass jerseys. The new jerseys are sweet as hell. I love them.
Yeah.
I love the new
Yeah.
jerseys.
That's really awesome.
We'll see what the alt is tomorrow. By the time this podcast comes out, and maybe it'll be horrible. But the home and away are dope. And my
I just want to say that I'm really glad that we're all in agreement that Malik Monk is part of the core.
Anybody who disagrees with that did not watch the playoffs last year.
Seriously.
Malik Monk is part of the core. Malik Monk is a large part of the core.
That was the player that I was pounding the table for over Luke fucking Kennard.
Mm-hmm. I wanted him too because we had 10 in that draft and we traded back and took Justin Jackson and Harry Giles. But I was like, you got to keep Fox and Monk together. It's the Kentucky thing. They were awesome together at Kentucky and they were awesome together in the playoffs. They were pretty much like the only two guys on our team. The two of them and Keegan Murray were like the only guys who did not shit their pants in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'll say Trey Lyles was pretty good too, but Sabonis, and I know Sabonis was hurt, but like him and Herter and Harrison Barnes and some other guys, we got some questions to answer this season.
Yeah.
My last loser and my biggest loser, and this might seem like a zag or a hot take. I think the biggest loser of free agency was the Houston Rockets. And I'm sure that people from Houston fans who listen to this podcast are probably like, think I hate them because I also shit on their NFL draft. They spent $60 million per season to bring in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. I like Fred VanVleet. I don't like Fred VanVleet for $50 million. I do not like Dylan Brooks. I do not know which part of last season the Rockets looked at and said, I want to give that guy $80 million. I think the Rockets fell for a trap that a lot of teams fall for, and it's like one of the cardinal sins in sports. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you have to spend it. And you have this young, interesting team where like you have all these young guys. You got Amen Thompson, who they just brought in, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, KPJ, like all sorts of young guys who need the ball and need minutes to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're spending $60 million on two vets who, like, honestly, what does bringing in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks do for this team? Like, how many more wins is that worth?
A handful.
Yeah, like
And
somewhere between 5 and 10.
I have a bigger issue with the Dylan Brooks signing than the Fred VanVleet deal. Like, I know it's too. I mean, it was like 40 million a year, right? Um,
It's a max contract. It's a
yeah,
3-year max. It's like 43 million a year, 44 million a year for
yeah,
Fred VanVleet.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely more than I would have offered him. I mean, I at least know that he's a really good player and that he's got a good work ethic and he can like help build a positive culture for these young guys as they are developing. But I don't see at all any purpose for Dylan Brooks on this roster. Like, I can understand the argument for Fred VanVleet, but I cannot understand the argument for Dylan Brooks.
It was like a month ago that we were all talking about Dylan Brooks going to play in China next season.
Yeah.
And they signed him for $80 million, 4 years, $80 million.
His team immediately after their season was over announced that there was no deal, no salary low enough for them to re-sign him. And you said, yeah, that's the guy I want. I would really like for Rockets fans to think about that.
Yeah, I really do, honestly, even without the names on the players, I do think they fell into the trap of like, hey, we have all this money. Like,
Yeah.
we can afford to overpay guys. And like, you should just never overpay guys. You should just never do it if you can help it. Like, if like, who are they bidding against for those two guys? Like, I know Toronto probably wanted VanVleet back, but like, I guarantee that they were offering VanVleet more than double what Toronto was going to.
Yeah.
And Brooks, like, who are you bidding against for Brooks besides like the Shanghai Sharks or something like that? So, like, to bring those two guys in for that amount of money and just lock up your cap space for the next 3 to 4 years and just be like, yeah, we're fine. I think it's going to bite them in the ass. And I think like they're not even a play-in team with how loaded the West is next season.
No.
So unless like Jalen Green takes some kind of like jump that I just don't see, this team is just going to keep being bad. And now they're going to spend $140 million to do it. So
Jalen Green ain't making that jump because he's spending too much time with Cade Cunningham in his head.
Jalen Green, if you've seen the videos that came out over the last week, is spending a lot of time doing a lot of things that are weird.
Yeah.
But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt, starting next week, this podcast is going to war.
It really honestly is.
Matt and I are currently constructing our NBA top 30 list. Also getting input from fan favorites Clint and Devin as to who they think the top 30 NBA players are. Gonna put it in a consensus list, and then we're gonna fight about it for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So
what's funny is that like either we're going to be fighting because our rankings are like wildly different, or they're going to be exactly the same, and we're going to fight because we keep doing this shit.
Well, this is why we got input from Clint and Devin, because we would just have the same list and it's not much of a consensus. Just like, I have Jimmy Butler 4, but I also have Jimmy Butler 4. Okay, let's move on. So really what we're going to be fighting, in some places we will fight each other. In others, we will fight the consensus list as to why Jimmy Butler is not number 1. But yeah, we're going to be back next Wednesday with our first 10 guys, players 30 through 21. Yeah. Counting down this time. We'll be back next 3 weeks fighting over who the top 30 NBA players are. You're not going to want to miss those. Matt, I will see you in person on Friday.
I will.
All right. Bye, guys. Bye, Mom.
Bye, Robin.